Shalom. In our last video, we left off talking about the Mosaic covenant and how powerful that covenant is, because the covenant of Yah has been narrowed down to the very children of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. We tried to make it absolutely clear that the covenant relationship between us and Yah is not a secret. It's just a secret to us because they would not teach it to us. We did not know this information was about us, Zion. The Mosaic covenant is to the people of Israel. In this simple Wikipedia article, which lets everybody know that, of course, if it's on Wikipedia, the whole world knows this information, that we are a kingdom of priests and a set-apart holy nation. We have to follow his commandments and keep his covenant. I want to also mention that in the 10 commandments, which is part of our covenant, Yah gave the children of Israel the Shabbat. What have we been teaching forever? That you can't be done with the Shabbat? Do you see it? As the permanent sign of his covenant. So notice what they're doing, Zion, when they cause us to break the Shabbat. When this world and this society causes us to break the Shabbat, something simple as that, it's the breaking of the covenant. And he said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And here it is permanent. Exodus 31:12 through 17. And I had some other information I was going to give you, and I might do it in another video. But for now, just know that the whole world knows that we are supposed to be keeping Shabbat because we are a covenant people. Anybody else, they could do whatever they want. They're not in the covenant that we are in. But according to Exodus chapter 31, verse 12 through 17, the Shabbat is one of the permanent signs, which means that we are to be keeping Shabbat forever. And I mentioned this before, that we find Shabbat from the Genesis all the way to Revelation. All right. So once we understand what the Mosaic covenant is, and that's the one to the nation, and that's why there's more elaboration on that in the scripture. That's why there's more details on how to keep the covenant. That's when we get the 10 commandments. It's because the Mosaic covenant, being the written covenant, gives us a foundation for life for the rest of the existence of the world, but really forever. And it is in the Mosaic covenant that we find out about Hamashiach, who is to come. It's in the Mosaic covenant that we find out about our how we ended up in slavery all those times and how we ended up in slavery this time. And it also in the Mosaic covenant is how we find out how to get out of slavery and how to be a free people. We also find out how to turn back to Yah and pray. All of that is in that covenant. And that's why I mentioned it's very important that we read the covenant. All right. So I'm going to move from the Mosaic covenant and just mention something about the priestly covenant. And of course, this is a covenant that Yah makes with Aaron and the house of Aaron. And of course, later on, the tribe of Levi. And then, of course, we find not only the tribe of Levi, but then we find out that when we study Torah, we realize that even other nations can become Levites. But Aaron and his bloodline are the ones that would be like the high priests. We'll get into that later. And of course, that would only continue until Hamashiach. When Hamashiach comes, he then fulfills the perfect order of the priest, because he doesn't have to offer sacrifices for his own sin because he has none. And being a perfect go-between, He settles it. So does Yah get rid of the priesthood? No. Yah just gets rid of the Aaronic priesthood. But there's always going to be a priesthood among us and Yah. We always need a go-between. Now we're operating under the priesthood of the promise of the order of Melchizedek. All right? And we see that Hamashiach will fulfill this covenant 100%. And then, of course, we're going to narrow it down one more time. And I've been trying to put this out for a while, and I'm so glad I finally made it. And that is the Davidic covenant, or Dawid, King Dawid. So someone say, well, y'all made a covenant with King Dawid? And yes, it is called, and look, it's not just me. I'm telling you, the whole world knows information. It's called the Royal Covenant. You see it? So now you have a royal covenant. The royal covenant, which now I'm telling you they know, in 2 Samuel chapter 7, it promised to establish his dynasty forever. All right? That's what it promises. While acknowledging that its original royal covenant's promises have been given to the ancestors of the whole nation, of course, Abraham. Wait, so what's going on here? So in the Davidic covenant, which we just read, that even the heathens know this. They know that the true dynasty of the world is not in Europe. It's not in England. It's not in France. It's not in Russia. It's not in the Americas. It is among the house of Judah, the royal house of Yehudah. That's our house. And the fourth tribe is our tribe, most likely. Of course, we've been blended with other tribes, but I'm trying to make a point that the Davidic covenant has not been done away with. How do I know? Because Hamashiach is the forever king. So the covenant that's made with Yah and David concerning his kingdom lasting forever, that covenant is intact today because we have a king who's still alive, Hamashiach, Yahushua. Now, what is interesting about Hamashiach is that Hamashiach is greater than David. David himself said, Yahuwah said to me, or Yahuwah said to my master, sit here until I make your enemies your footstool. So Zion, you need to know that this covenant in Hamashiach is a Davidic covenant fulfilled. This idea, because his blood, we don't have to now keep the laws, statutes, and the commandments. It's just the opposite. That's the argument that is made all through Scripture. How can you feel that you can now live in violation of Torah when Torah is not just about the blood of bulls and goats? And if the blood of bulls and goats and turtle doves struck fear into the hearts of people and carried with it the death penalty, how much greater is the blood of Hamashiach? Zion, we have to relearn our scripture. We have to relearn our Bible. And we have to understand how important it is we walk according to the Torah. Now, I brought the verse out in last video. You all go back and read Jeremiah chapter 31. Because Jeremiah chapter 31 is what Paul is talking about when he says, I'm going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel. When you get into them verses like around 27, all the way like to 31, 32, you're going to discover what he's really talking about. He's not saying that the law is done away with. He's like, no, Torah will be now written in the hearts and minds of people. which will then render us without excuse. And we won't be able to be in the Shamayim talking about, I didn't know. He said, no, you knew. And all I'm doing as a Moreh is trying to remind you that you know. And that our job is to go back and study this book, y'all, and really, really understand what Abba Yah is trying to teach us in the Torah. All right, I had written down one more thing, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Even in this article, they have an Islamic view. I thought that was interesting. An Islamic view of the Mosaic covenant. And they actually know that in those verses, Yah admonishes us that they admit that Yah gave the commandments to us and that the covenant was with us. But then they go on to say, but we of course broke the covenant, which is true. But the interesting thing is that they said, yeah, of course, Yah made a covenant with Israel through Moses on Mount Sinai. Hoo-wee. In the Quran, also, the Quran also states how Yah cursed the children of Israel and made them suffer for breaking the covenant. And they have all the verses here. They have the verses where you can look them up and see that they admit that. They know that we're the ones in covenant with Yah. And then I also want to put this in the video before we close. And that is, I want to talk about the fact that our people agreed to it, which is good because that, of course, means that we can live with our King Yahushua and Shamayim forever. But our people agreed to the covenant in more than one place. And the phrase, all that Yah says, is found several times in our Bible. And it's very interesting because we got people saying that like, I just want to do whatever he's telling me to do. I just want to be his. I just want to do whatever he says. And the funny thing is, that's not a mystery about what he says. What he says is already written in the Bible. But I'm wondering what I should do and how I should be. Just read the Bible. It's there. And you have to make the commitment that our forefathers made. All that Yah says, I will do, or we will do. So in Exodus chapter 19, verse 8, Exodus chapter 24, verse 3, Exodus chapter 24, verse 7. Why are those so important? Because we see one of the phrases before the laws, statutes, and commandments. Once Yah had said, hey, I brought you out of Egypt, they said, well, anything you say, we'll do. Then after he gave the 10 commandments, and then he gave further instruction concerning our covenant, then they came back and said, all that he said, we will do. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 27, Moses recalls their confession and said, all that we will listen and we will obey him. And then in Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 17, you're going to see the same thing again. Now, notice in Deuteronomy chapter 26, that's 2 chapters before 28. So everybody knows about Deuteronomy 28, but we need to know that in Deuteronomy 26 is when our people said, yes, we're going to do it. So he said, all right, look, you need to know what you're getting into. And they were like, we already know. And he lays it out. And of course, we know what happened. And then after Moses dies, because people say, well, that was the Mosaic covenant. The question is, did the people have to continue in the covenant after Moses died? And the answer is yes. In the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 24, the people once again say, man, we're going to follow Yah, everything he says. We're going to follow that covenant. And of course, you can start reading around verse 13 and in Joshua chapter 24. And you will understand that our people knew they were in a covenant relationship with Yah. Just like today's Zion, we need to not only know it, but we got to now say, let me find who I am in this book, and let me find out what this book is saying about, number one, how we are to love Abba Yah, how we are to serve him and to worship him properly. And everything he says for us to do, we're supposed to do it. Second, how we are supposed to love one another. How, and I'm using the word love in the Hebraic sense. How are we supposed to be treating and dealing with our brother? Because that's when he says the law and the prophets hang on these two things, that's what it means. It means that the whole idea of having the Torah and the instructions is so that we can learn how to do these things, so that we can put them into practice. And once we begin to put them into practice, we make ourselves, we put ourselves in a position for Yah to hear us. But as long as we decide to walk contrary to the covenant, it then, unfortunately, puts us in situations and circumstances that, of course, has Yah turning his ear against us. He says, return unto me and I'll return unto you. And so the very, how do I want to say this? The one thing that we need to do more than anything else is the one thing it seems that we're not doing. And I don't understand. Why don't we just give our covenant a try? We've tried everything else. You want to fix the situation of our people worldwide? Why don't we try keeping the covenant to the best of our ability? Turn our hearts back to Yah. First, read the covenant and know what it says, and then start doing everything that's in it. And therefore, we'll put ourselves in a position where we can call upon the name of our Abba. And he sends his salvation our way, his strong arm to deliver us. Because that's the only way we're going to get out of the situation that we're in. I'm talking about worldwide. And be gathered unto him. And know, before you say it, I don't believe that all of Israel, because I already know that all Israel is not Israel. But I do know that there is a remnant of Israel that's going to get it. There is a remnant that's going to understand it. And those that are understanding it must do it. You're in the remnant. And when that remnant, whatever the number is satisfied, you will begin to see the salvation of Yahuwah in your life, wherever you are. And you're talking about deliverance from this valley of shadow of death. It will surely come. We must trust our King. We must trust the covenant. We must trust the ratifier of the covenant and the guarantee of the covenant. That's the true meaning of the blood does not lose its power. It's the idea of the covenant, whereas all of the animal blood, it didn't have everlasting eternal power. But the blood of Hamashiach in the final covenant is everlasting. Let us, Zion, turn to our King, walk according to his ways, and see the salvation of Yah. One love to the 12 tribes of Israel and all you, my father's children, that have been grafted in. Shalom.